In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, the Kraken are described as massive squid-like entities that live at the deepest recesses of the oceans, surfacing only to capture prey, usually ships full of humanoids. Their tentacles are strong enough to crush the hull of a war galleon, and are wreathed in jagged barbs that could tear apart wood, stone, or steel without issue. They were known to be cruel and destructive creatures, often destroying ships as they passed for the thrill alone, or wiping out all life on small islands purely for sport. Some were particularly clever and evil, in that they would not simply kill their prey. Instead, they would capture any survivors and enslave them in underwater caverns. These slaves would be forced to tend to the Kraken's needs, including acting as their food, and their offspring would be raised to worship the Kraken as their sole master or god. The lore of 5th edition states that the Krakens once ruled the seas until forces of good aligned and drove them into the deep waters, where only creatures of darkness can survive. They're now known as the Terrors of the Sea, and are sometimes associated with beings from the Far Realm due to past associations with aboleths and other beings from beyond the Astral Sea. The standard Kraken has an AC of 18 and 472 hit points. They have amazing stats and insanely good saving throws against everything except charisma. They're immune to lightning and non-magical attacks, as well as being frightened or paralyzed. They have true sight, making them almost impossible to hide from, and can speak several languages telepathically. They thrive in water but can breathe on land, and they completely ignore difficult terrain, being restrained or slowed, and they can break grapples with ease. They're a siege monster with a devastating multi-attack consisting of 3 tentacles. Alternatively, they can use their action for a bite attack that deals 13 to 34 damage, and if performed on a grappled target, causes the target to be swallowed. When swallowed, they're blind and restrained and have total cover from outside sources, making healing next to impossible. They also take 12 to 72 acid damage on the Kraken's turn. If they deal 50 damage or more to the Kraken, it must make a DC 25 con save or else throw up the player. The Kraken has 10 tentacles that deal 13 to 28 damage on a hit and grapples the target automatically. They can fling players, throwing grappled targets up to 60 feet and knocking them prone, dealing 1d6 damage for each 10 feet thrown if they hit a solid surface. If that surface is another creature, that creature must make a dex save or else also take the damage. The Kraken can also summon a lightning storm that hits up to 3 targets for 4 to 40 lightning damage each on a failed dex save. The Kraken also has 3 legendary actions in which it can use a tentacle attack, fling attack, lightning storm for 2 of 3 actions, or ink cloud for 3 out of 3 actions. The ink cloud can only be used underwater and creates an obscuring poisonous cloud 60 feet in radius. As a DM, I would be following the lore in that most Kraken encounters would take place on a ship, with players really only seeing the tentacles of the creature. Underwater combat against a Kraken is incredibly dangerous, and is a deadly scenario for most levels. I would personally only have players fight a Kraken underwater if it had managed to destroy the ship they're on through prolonged combat. For the Kraken's turns, I would start by using the multi-attack to try and damage and grapple 3 players. On subsequent turns, I would wait for a player to escape the grapple and then use 1 legendary action to attempt to grab them again, knowing that they will likely remain grappled for the rest of the round. I would then use 2 legendary actions to call a lightning storm against the players that are currently not grappled. On the Kraken's next turn, I would have it target one of the grappled players with a bite to take the player out of combat and throw them into its stomach, where they'll be taking acid damage and trying desperately to escape, forcing them to use higher level spells like Dimension Door or Blight to escape or deal enough damage to be spit up. From there, I would use legendary actions in round 2 to fling those people still grappled over the edge of the ship to fight in water, or use tentacle attacks to ensure that there is someone to swallow next round. As the fight progresses, I would use main actions and legendary actions to grapple and swallow players, as well as assault them with lightning storms to slowly whittle their health away and put them on the defensive at all times. If the Kraken is fighting in its lair, it gains some lair actions. The current within the lair can be used to push players away from the Kraken, which is useful for getting rid of melee players. The water within 60 feet of the Kraken causes vulnerability to lightning, which when paired with a lightning storm legendary action can be very deadly. And finally, the Kraken can just cause lightning damage when it's in its lair. I would probably alternate between the weakness to lightning and the lightning damage, throwing in the current lair action whenever melee players are getting a little too dangerous. I personally would only use the Ink Cloud legendary action to escape from combat that's gone badly for the Kraken, as it deals decent poison damage and obscures movement, perfect for stopping pursuers. However, it costs all 3 legendary actions and can be cast away by currents or spells like Control Water, so the cost is way too high for anything but a final escape. In mythology, the Kraken was a legendary sea monster that was said to exist in the oceans around Norway. The term was first used in the early 1700s by traveler Francesco Negri, after locals told him about a giant squid-like creature called Hafgufa, a medieval Scandinavian sea monster with octopus limbs. The term Kraken was created as the Norwegian sailors were using the term krakje, meaning malformed tree, and in the context of the oceans, a malformed giant octopus or squid. The Kraken gained popularity and became the subject of sailor superstition and myth when it was included in fiction written by French novelist Victor Hugo, whose writings later inspired Jules Verne, who wrote such tales as 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It's theorized that the Scandinavian myth of Hafgufa was likely created by ancient Icelanders who spotted giant squid at a distance, as well as the Gorgonocephalus euconemus, or Medusa-head starfish, that sometimes washed up on shore. Accounts by Eric Pontoppidan in 1753 asserted that these were the pupal form of the great krakje, and that by comparing them to a juvenile specimen that had washed ashore earlier in the year, he was certain that they were of the same species. Modern marine biologists now know that the former is a basket starfish, and the latter was likely a giant squid carcass. In comparing the monster to the myth, we find that the Kraken of D&D is basically identical to the creature from myth. Both are massive squid or octopus-like creatures that delight in destroying ships of wayward sailors, pulling them down to their final destination at the bottom of the sea. If you enjoyed that video, please leave a like and comment below, and consider subscribing to the channel. You can also join the Patreon for $1 a month to access videos days before they're posted here, as well as other exclusive stuff like short stories, videos, and more.